Hi, I'm Roobina Karode. I'm the Director and Chief Curator of the KNMA Museum of Art. And this is an exhibition, or these two solo exhibitions have been curated by me and the team here. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful exploration putting up these two exhibitions.
Can you tell us about Mohan Samant's early life and what led him to pursue a career in art?
It's a very interesting question. It has always intrigued me how do artists become artists, in the sense that what has been their journey, where do they begin? Do they always have a dream about it? Is it that when they are little, they know that they will become an artist? And that is important to know because we like to really look at what an artist's journey has been, where they began, how did they move from one place to another? How did they shift from what they were doing earlier to now? And I never had the opportunity to meet the artist, but whatever we have learned through his early works, his books on him, his curated exhibitions, his life here in India and in New York, it takes us back to Bombay, where he was born in a Brahmin family. And he himself says that he was a very stubborn, rebellious child, while his father was an English teacher and a headmaster who was a strict disciplinarian, which is something that he resisted right from his childhood. And so the seeds were right there of a man or an artist who was to become a creative rebel of sorts. And he had a childhood which was very different. He was very interested in things that normally children are not interested in. Okay, so there was a sense of looking at the world very differently right from the beginning. His mother was a creative person, and I think he was more inclined towards her pursuits. And from very, very young, when he was in his formative years, he got interested in music. So music was his first love in one sense. And he decided to play an instrument. And the story goes on that he came to Sarangi much later. He started with playing the flute, and then he wanted to play a dilruba, and the dilruba that his parents could afford to get him was a broken dilruba, and his father said to him that if you're able to rectify and make this dilruba work, I shall get you one. I'll get you a sarangi as well. So the story goes on that he was such a smart boy, he decided to go and chase some horses, okay, and get some hair from their tail to actually use them as strings of the bow. Okay? And his father was impressed, and that's how he got hooked on to the dilruba and later on to playing the sarangi, which he really mastered and used to play diligently, in his while he was painting as well. So from there he moves on to showing more interest in the arts. He got interested in drawing, he got interested in painting, and that's how he lands up in the J.J. School of Art in Bombay at that time. And he studies there. His guide and mentor was S.B. Palsikar, Professor S.B. Palsikar. And then later on, he meets the Progressive Artist Group. I think by the time it's 1949, and Souza and Raza have already left India by then. And he meets M.F. Hussain, and gradually he becomes the second group or second generation who joins the group later on with Guy Tonde and others. That's how he has a stint with JJ School, then with the Progressive Artist Group. Very early on, he also wins medals at the Bombay Art Society, And his talent was being recognized as someone who was doing something very different from the very beginning.
How did his time at the Sir J.J. School of Art influence his artistic direction, considering that Samant was briefly a member of the Progressive Artists group? How did this association shape his work and career?
I would say that the camaraderie was very interesting between the progressive artists group, the way they were together, the way they looked at each other's works, the way they were critical about each other's works. But I think Mohan Samant was a bit different in the sense that a lot of progressive artists group, a lot of artists from the progressive group were actually very committed to a specific medium, whether it was painting, whether it was sculpture, primarily that was their mode of expression, that medium of expression. But Samant was very interested in not being loyal to any single medium. He wanted to break this, this established notion of art making. And it was something that came very naturally to him, that he was looking at a very free and flexible way of making painting, where he was free from any kind of dictations or dictates, where he was free from any fixed notions about style, about aesthetics, and hence that subversiveness started, or the irreverence, let's say, started very early in his work. So, though he started as a painter, he went through watercolors, he did oils, he did go through that phase. It was a very short lived phase. He quickly was trying to see how he could rupture the surface, rupture the space, add in layers, bring in layers which were not just of paint, but of different materials, different mediums. And I think a messiness of sorts, when you want to really combine things in a very, in just a playful way to start with, in a very experimentative way, he goes through that mess, okay, and loves it. And he then wants to arrive at something which is very, very much what he was desiring to do. So I think that process takes him on toward a very distinct journey from the rest of the progressives.
How did his interest in music, particularly his practice of playing the sarangi, influence his art?
I don't think I can make direct correlations, but I think what is interesting is that music makes you understand uh, or be receptive to sound in a very different way, to be receptive to rhythms in a very different way, to be receptive to the notion of pause, the notion of silence, the notion of sound, okay, and these relationships, and it does start having an effect on you, which may not be any kind of a direct, a direct cognition of the fact that it is happening, but it does. And Mohan Samant has admitted to those things, okay, that for him, why music was so important, okay. But what I see is that he had been, I find him really ahead of his time in that sense. And I'm also quite intrigued why his discovery or has taken so long, or how people do not know much about him. In fact, when this exhibition opened, a lot of people from the art community texted to me that his exhibition is a revelation to them, which is like nothing like this they had imagined, okay, that he would have achieved in his New York years when he was living. But for me, if I go back in time, in 60s, when he was here and when he was traveling within India, and then later on to Rome, to Egypt, and to many places before he settled in New York. It's very interesting. The journeys within India opened his eyes to many different things. For instance, his interest in Indian miniatures, for instance, his interest in Ajanta and other mural traditions, his interest in the folk, his interest in tribal, and later on it goes on. His interest in Egyptian art, which we know is so predominant, his interest in African art, his interest in art from different parts of the world. Okay, it can go back to tribal deities and totemic forms. It goes back to Egyptian figuration. It goes into many, many such references. So there are so many points of references in Samant, which becomes, because it's almost like a world, a world is colliding there. So there's a collision of ancient symbols and motifs, medieval times, iconographies, something coming, typologies coming from elsewhere, Indian miniature traditions, and his interest in color, his interest in line, which you see how he plays with, and his interest in wash, which the miniature paintings we know about, So how did he bring all of this on his table? And when I visited his studio much later, I realized that his studio was like filled with objects from different cultures, where he had dolls collected, toys collected, which you also see how he brings in toys here, isn't it? He has actually embedded toys in his canvases and in his papers, works. So he was collecting a lot of things, gathering them as if he knew, how he's going to play with them and what kinds of associations and evocations he will bring into his work. So in that sense, I find he liberated himself from belonging to any one culture, any one style, any one technique, any one medium, and created, his own. He was extremely inventive and imaginative, but he also had all this material that he had gathered to really play with.
Can you elaborate on how ancient cultures and modern art movements influenced his work, especially after his move to New York?
His mature phases of working were all in New York. And he had a very interesting studio. In his studio, or in his where he worked, or in his apartment, he had trees inside the house, and there were 25 or 30 birds that lived around that. And he had one divan side sort of a setting where he used to play sarangi, and the rest of the space was all his studio. Now, he had all kinds of materials, all kinds of equipments, tools, a whole cupboards full of tools, because I believe he used to make his own frame, he used to make his own puncturings of the canvas. If you see this canvas from behind, it is the most interesting work of art. He has dug holes into it, and he has placed separate boxes to hold the objects within, like the grave that he creates of the skeleton lying inside, So all of this, the evolving of a visual language, was all happening in New York. And he had many interesting anecdotes to talk about of his influences that came both from the Western world and from India and elsewhere in Asia. So in that sense, his work is hybrid in one sense, or actually brings in many eclectic sources. But the way he internalizes them and really transforms them in his work is his own distinct visual style or expression that you see. I think he got that freedom in one sense. He freed himself, and New York, the place where he lived and worked, became like this, it became his, a place very fluid, very liberated to work and fail and rework and keep working. And I think that also became his methodology, because if you look at the works, there are layers within the work. It's very interesting how he draws a relationship between what lies beneath and what is on the upper surface. It's also very interesting in the way he interweaves the play between line, surface, and structure. Okay, all three things are being played out. The structure is changing. You are not seeing a flat surface anywhere, so it's not that you can call it a painting. It's not a flat surface. You have objects on it. You have layers on it. You also have elimination of things there. You also find that in a lot of work, he actually builds the ground. So the ready-made given ground or surface is not enough. He builds the surface. He layers it with sand, dust, gravel, many other kinds of things. And so the ground becomes something else. When we look at a work like this, which is one of my favorite works, I feel that if you look at the surface, it almost looks like the surface has gone through a sedimentation, and the fossil of the skeletal, okay, of the human skeletal is actually half buried and half out. So what part is buried is, of course, beneath the surface that you can't see. So this hide and seek play, and this what is happening inside the surface, or what has gone beyond the surface, which we keep thinking, it makes us curious to know, is the way that Mohan Samant works. So the relationships that he works out within that space, the idea to call it magic in the square, which is a title from one of his own works, is the magic is created because of this kind of a very intuitive, very, what to say, the word should be innovative way of working, in which there is scope for adventure, there is scope for discovery, and there is scope for accidents as well. You may do something and something else tells you to do another thing. So the work itself is now asking you to do something else. That is the process that he picked up, which is why no two works look the same. That's something so amazing. And when I first saw his work, I was so drawn to the wire lines and the fabulous shadows that they cast, which means he did not even draw the surface. He actually wired the line, and the wired line casts a shadow, which becomes the drawing on the surface. Okay? Now you can imagine how many layers and how much is he thinking about the juxtapositions and the unexpected encounters which will happen within the square, or within this surface, within just the boundary of this paper or canvas. And that is Mohan Samant. Every time something different enters into his work, and it creates magic of sorts. And there is a very playful irreverence about it. Yes, he's very interested in ancient civilizations. He's very interested in the destiny of man. He's very interested in the history of mankind. He's very interested in how did the caveman live, okay, the fears of the caveman, okay, or the prehistoric man, how did he face. So what were the totems that saved them from all the fears? What were the shamans doing? What were the magicians doing? He's very interested in all of this. Okay, why did the Egyptians put paintings inside the pyramids? Why were the pyramids simple from outside and so complex from inside? Now these stories, these interests come out in a very different way in his work. Okay, he is not interested in just bringing them as points of direct references, but the stories behind all of these creations of human creations have been so exciting. And then how he irreverently puts them there, or how he really works with them, is the story of Mohan Samant, actually.
How does this exhibition at KNMA stand out from previous showcases of Samant's work?
It's a very good question, because if you asked anybody, they would say they would have seen very little of Samant. In fact, what you see as those cutouts, very, very interesting way in which he rubs these surfaces to make them, luminous. Colors have been very important for him. How he makes the cutouts of the papers, how he actually shows us layer after layer, and within which You may see a Picasso eye, you may see Miro, you may see someone else, you may see the miniature way of space making. You may, because there is no single perspective or no single vantage point from where you will view the work. So there are all of this happening, and it's it's so interesting that with all this that he was doing, he remained relatively unknown, especially in India. Not to say that his talent was not recognized. He won awards here, he won awards in New York, his exhibitions were always admired, and yet somewhere his art remains not discovered fully. I'm really grateful that I saw his works in a good number at Javeri Contemporary in Bombay, in Mumbai, and that is how some of these works came into the collection. And also, I'm very grateful to the family. Mohan Samant, of course, has passed away, but his wife, Gillian Samant, she gifted 4 works of his very long time back to KNMA for the KNMA collection, which are also on display. And so Jill Samant and Ibrahim Joel, I want to thank them personally as well, because I think all the works, and yes, we also have on loan 7 works which have come from Amrita Javeri. I think they have made a substantial collection, substantial exhibition for people for art viewers to see his early works, later on move on to his mixed media kind of works, then his paper cutouts, okay, and get a sense of, where he moved from watercolors to creating works which had, play with surface and structure. In fact, I think that the very important part of curating these 2 solos together has been that these 2 artists are really constructivists of one kind. They both believe in pictorial construction. Their methods are different. Their pursuit is different. What they seek from it is different, but they both work towards, they are so much dedicated to the construction of the painting, how to bring painting alive, how do they really free themselves in what they want to present through their work. And this construction which the viewers will enjoy, Mohan Samant is of course from a generation apart from Amitava. In fact, Amitava saw his 3 works at the NGMA in Delhi and got very inspired by what Samant was doing. So they are a generation apart maybe, but what is interesting is how these 2 work on the notion of painting and how do they really invent their pictorial constructions through various mediums and materials that they bring in.
What are some of the key pieces featured in this exhibition and why were they chosen?
Okay. I would say in Samant, I did not have much choice because you do not have a lot of work of his here. So, and whatever was collected was brilliant, I would say. And it really made me build the narrative. So the narrative could be built, which is so wonderful that I could actually get a work on loan from the Delhi Art Gallery, which is a very early work. We have 2 early works. There were some early works that came from elsewhere. And then, his main phase of when he was really working, into a very mature phase of his is also present here. So I think that these 21 works are, I'm very happy about it that we do have these works, and they are a visual treat, literally, because I did an exercise when I was working on these two exhibitions where I was very interested to bring to the viewers, uh, or bring to their attention rather, that if you really list down, you will find in Mohan Samant a list of materials that you could actually put out. What all has he used in his works? And you would be surprised. It's not just color pencils, it's not just graphite, it's not just watercolor, it's not just gouache, it's not just paper, it's not just cutout, it's not just ink pen, it's not just wire, it's not just nails, it's not just boxes. I can go on, and there's a list there. And, and then a similar exercise when I take to Amitava's exhibition, the list goes threefold because he got so interested to gather and collect personal memorabilia through his journeys that he was almost archiving his own, archiving the self or archiving the journey of his life, in which such commonplace objects and a bus ticket, an exhibition that he visited in Berlin, the ticket of that, a train that he took, which was the fastest train, maybe, those kinds of commonplace materials which we throw otherwise have all become a part of his language. They are almost like reminders or memory objects, to his life. And so if that list you look, that list will have a broken button, a thread, a needle. It could have stamp tickets, bus tickets. It could have anything. It could have even a restaurant. When you go in a restaurant, you have a paper napkin. You name it, any and everything. It's almost a message to students that, you can actually create art through discards. And it's not that it has happened for the first time. So with Amitava, when people read, they will find that just the most banal material, okay, which is like material that we don't even think for a moment that we would keep. Very fragile, frail, something that just needs to be used and thrown. Those are the kinds of material that Amitava embeds in his surface. And actually, he's able to evoke meanings out of them. So when people see those collage drawings, I call them collage drawings, or very assemblaging techniques that both of these artists use, because they assemble things and they are disparate materials that they put together. It's not even coherent, it's not even everything is harmonious. There are very different kinds of materials that they put through. It's all done with a logic of their own, of course, but we get hints into, if we see closely, if we understand closely, if we look closely, we will see that we can make associations with violence, destruction, war, human fragmentation, okay, world crumbling into pieces. There are all these undertones that you would find. And really, the treatment of figure itself, the way that the figure has been treated by both of them, where they slice it, cut it, okay, fragment it, okay, reconstruct it, okay. Sometimes you find a hand becoming a tree, sometimes you find the man becoming a stone, sometimes you find something is missing. So I think all these are actually cues that we need to pick up, that why this language is of a kind where fragmentation and piecing together and adding and eliminating are so important. So the way the strategies they have worked out in their work, they also carry meaning, and often the material is the metaphor. If I throw red ink on a gauze, what would it convey? It would convey a wound that is bleeding, isn't it? So the material itself becomes the meaning, the symbol, the metaphor for us to think more about the world that we live in. And I think that is what they do.
Which work do you think will resonate the most with the visitors and why?
Well, I can tell you clearly in Mohan Samant, this work, a lot of people have responded to this work, and also to the cutouts, which are quite intriguing and quite they require a really a very controlled, disciplined hand. So he may be indisciplined in many other ways, but in art, you can't play music unless you have that rigor. You can't do this art unless you have that rigor. So he's a very strong-willed man, and also a person who really mastered what he wanted to do.
What do you think were Saman's core motivations behind his artistic practice?
Many motivations. As I said, one of the things was that he was he deviated from the norms of painting at that time. And I think he very soon realized that he had to create a different world within the square, within the limits of his work. And that remains throughout, from the small works to the larger works that he has executed, the way he has worked. And I think another thing about him is that I find him a deep thinker also. He's not somebody who was just randomly doing this. And I can say this for Amitava also, that both these artists, they had a range of interests and influences. Like Amitava was very interested in cinema, and whether the cinema was Satyajit Ray's or Tarkovsky's, they're both there, or Kurosawa. You see them here as his inspiration. We have presented some of the films that he was very inspired by, or music. Both were very much into music, literature, poetry. Okay, so just imagine how rich their palette is as far as their inspiration is concerned. It comes from the most evocative, emotional forms that basically connect us as humans. Poetry has that soul, so does literature, so do films. And I think that plays out in the work. Like in Amitava's work, somewhere you read a line from Nietzsche, you read a line from Tagore, which is there. You're seeing a work, and somewhere you come through a hint of that. So there is a play also with word and images, how words will get integrated with the image, okay, while other things are also speaking.
How has Saman's work continued to influence contemporary artists?
Yeah, I think it does. And I feel, because I've been seeing works of artists from younger generations who, who have been working in this direction, where they want to, may not necessarily work with a figure, but they still work in abstraction, but abstraction through cutouts, abstraction through assembling materials, abstraction through, let's say, through techniques, some of the techniques that he used. So, but I don't know how directly that is, that can be said, or whether there is a, artists can tell us if they really, but I know that some of them do express that Samant was very important, and for them, when they just happened to see Samant's work somewhere, they were really struck by what he was doing in the 60s and 70s, which is many, many decades ago.
Why do you think showcasing and celebrating Mohan Saman's works and legacy in today's art scene is significant?
Very significant. I think one of the things that museums all over the world do is to really, yes, we must present established artists and their oeuvres. We must look at generations of artists to be able to build an artistry and tell the story as we go along. But I think one of the most important missions of the museum is also to present discoveries, present artists who have not got their due, or who have not got critical attention as yet. And I think For both these artists, I have been thinking about this exhibition for now more than 4 years. And it has now happened. It has taken time, but it has happened. And I'm hopeful that this will be a realization also to people who visit that it was absolutely necessary to represent these artists and really have substantial viewing of their works.
How does Samont's legacy compare to other artists of his time, particularly those within the progressive artists group?
It's very interesting. The progressive artist group of Bombay, each one, though they came together as a group, I think the reason for their disbanding was also that they were all very strong individuals and they had their opinions and they knew what they wanted to do, or rather, they knew what they wanted to seek. Okay, so each one made a name or carved their own path and in a very determined and a very strong way. So if you look at Raza, he took the direction of abstraction. Okay, if you look at Hussain, he was very interested in the human figure and the existential story around it, and especially looking at the complexity of India as a nation, okay, as a newly formed nation, and really what would that language be? What are the paradoxes in India? How do we look at the rural and the urban? How do we look at the village and the city? What kinds of dialectical positions are there? And how do we really bring all that to talk about uh, nationalism in India? How do we look at India and Indian sensibility? And I think that was Hussein's path. And similarly, you can go on talking about whether it's Gaitonde, whether it's Krishan Khanna, whether it is Souza or Mohan Samant. And I think they each left a legacy.
What can today's young artists learn from Samont's work?
A lot. I think that if I'm not an artist, so but I'm so tempted to really think that if I was one, it would be so amazing to actually come to very serious art making through the most playful tools, okay, and through the most what to say, the word should be the most fluid and flexible way of art making, in the sense you just liberate yourself and you feel that, okay, I want to sum up the entire world till now in my work, and how do I do it and how I go about. And that's why I've been stressing both on Samant and Amitava, because I think the message that must go out is that I think in India we are storytellers as well as we are hoarders. We love to have things and keep the memories alive and be very emotionally connected. This is something my father gave me, or this is something that was written to me and I still hold it close to my heart. And I think the throwaway culture is a culture that came from the West. Okay, so the indifference to many things that we use and throw, or rather the insensitivity also towards just wasting resources. This is completely an opposite stance of that, where you feel that your work can grow. If you have a creative imagination, your work can be sparked and can grow and shape by the most, by the things that you are just ready to discard, or what you call as junk, or what you just throw away, or what you don't even look at. You can actually create a language out of it. So I think that is one of the things that I would say would really inspire artists. And I think, in general, I think people will be drawn to a very, I think what is most important in art is that it doesn't repeat itself. It should not repeat itself. Divergence is the form of creation, as they say. Sameness will kill it. Monotony will kill art. So there is a freshness about the work. There's still a freshness about the work that should be extremely appealing to the viewers.
Can you share any behind the scenes stories or challenges faced during the curation of this exhibition?
Oh, many. Every exhibition is a different challenge. And it can start from something very simple like I have works of Amitabh which are this size, this size, this size, this size, this size, this size, and I can go on. And I'm supposed to deal with them in the same space that is a given. Okay. How do I really lay the plan out for such works? What will I do? Like you would have seen that I have somewhere used a very simple method of putting a circle and coloring that circle or painting that circle and putting a square work on it. And I was just thinking, how many small works can I just put on the wall? And how would I really draw attention to what they must convey? And I started thinking, okay, if we knew the point, okay, which obviously means we don't know the point, but the point, if I translate the point into something else, it will become a dot, it will become a circle, it will become a specific shape. It can go on, isn't it? The translation of a dot, okay, so on the point, and that's when it just came to me that maybe I can use the motif of point or the dot or the circle and really create a kind of a wall in which I place these circles and place the works on it. And one of my favorite circles is the red one, which really uh, puts the figure out in a very telling way. And so sometimes you only know that maybe this will be the layout of the space and the show, but you really don't know how you will display it. And that starts happening, and really it's a mystery. Like if you ask Samant, he may also say, Mohan Samant will say that art is a mystery, and so will many others. So there is certainly something that you don't know how it happens. Maybe it's my interest in space making, maybe it's my interest also in understanding how I want viewers to experience the show from one room to another, one gallery to another, and many more things. And the best part is that working with a team makes it so exciting because everybody is brainstorming, one idea is coming, somebody is shunning the idea, the other one is saying, the other one says it and says, no, this is not going to work. It's all happening there, it's all a discussion, and it's an amazing discussion. It's so wonderful to work with the team here, the team that I have, where there is so much give and take and so much learning happening as we attend to every frame, what we see in it, what we don't see in it, what should we do about it, what do we think about the frame, what do we think about the color of the wall, and it goes on. So there are many, many exciting things that happen. And in this exhibition particularly, I've done a lot in terms of thinking about how to bring justice to some of the works of Amitava, which are very on fragile paper, extremely minimal. Will they get lost when I put them under a frame? Will they get lost if they are put in any other which way? So should I sandwich them? And I've also sandwiched them on a discard material. As you can see, it's a corrugated sheet which was to be thrown away. Thanks to Murthy ji, to the Ahuja framers, I was there to look for more, look for mounts, and that's something that I accidentally saw. And since this exhibition is so much about discovery and accident, that is something that really struck me. And I said, no, I would just hang them sandwiched, between class and have this corrugated sheet there, which was just about to be thrown away. So there are, I think it's very exciting to curatorially work, and especially this work has been extremely challenging. Both the artist and their artistic body of work is very, very challenging, both from the point of view of display, point of view of light, like for instance, the Amitava's central gallery, the dark room or the black room, which is painted black, where you have all his black canvases. Okay, a deliberate decision I took because I want his most favorite color is black. He's written poems on black. He's collected so much quotes on the idea of black. His understanding of the world, in which black is a very important color, is also behind it. What do we do? So the room is illuminated in a very particular way, as you have seen, which looks like the painting is self-emanating. It's self-illuminating, and you're able to see every little detail of the work, the stroke of the brush, the way he meticulously and so much with patience works on drawing with a correction pen, or really making dots through the surface, dots that shine because they're put at an angle, and very subdued way of embedding the canvas, but it all gets an illumination of a different kind and comes to life in a very different way. So that kind of immersion and experience, how to create it and why to create it, are all curatorial questions that we thought about here.
What has been the most challenging and rewarding part of preparing for this exhibition?
So I just love that a lot of people visit the exhibition because it is only on for 2 months, and would love their comments, their suggestions, their feedback, because I think that's very important for us to improve ourselves, to know what people respond to. And I must say that a lot of artists and people from the art community have written to us, and it feels great to get responses which are so encouraging.
Explain briefly the thought and story behind the title of this exhibition.
I think the title is so apt because Amitava has been extremely fond of the poet from whom I have taken this title. And I see in his work there is a very important place for the circle, which turns into a sun, which turns into a moon, which turns into something else. And it's always present in all his works. And yet, the narrative in the work is always kept ambiguous. Hints are given, suggestions are there. So, and most times it is also about what can we do to comprehend this world. Okay, the larger question is, if we knew the point of what, or why we live, why we breathe, what is existence, what is death, what is life, there are many of these questions which can come under this title, which is both philosophical but also can have many other nuances. It can also generate responses in many different ways. So I wanted an open-ended kind of title, which would have an intrigue, which would allow the viewers to also think how they want to interpret it. Well, if we knew the point, clearly means that we don't know the point, okay, of things. And yet, we do experience it, isn't it? We do. We keep telling ourselves many a times, what's the point of doing this? What's the point of this? Okay? And it's a line which we all use, but here it gets poetic because it's in a exhibition context. And for Samant, I thought magic in the square is extremely, he creates magic. He was very inspired by magic and mystery. And I think the idea that he wanted to also understand the civilizational history or the history of mankind had to do with because there is suspense in life. There is something that is still in the domain of belief. We don't have answers. So there is something about magic and mystery in our lives. And I thought that would also go very well with if we knew the point. Because in both there is an element of not knowing. There's an element of mystery of some kind. There's an element of the unknown. And I think that was why I chose those titles.
Can you discuss any unique or innovative display techniques used in this exhibition to enhance visitor engagement?
So there is in the room where the cinema, where the films are run, we have created a wall on which we are going to tell Amitava to come and draw or show the way that he works. And then we have designed some specific exercises for people who register to really engage and work with him. And of course, when one canvas is full, we might change the canvas and put another. But the idea was that the exploration of materials should not just be done without a brief. We wanted that people respond, whether students or just lay people who come would respond to a particular kind of a brief, which would also then set them to think how to use commonplace material, how to use things which are simple and mass produced, like bindis or like stickers or like color pencils, which so much of color pencils Amitav has used, which is now like even children say, "Nahi, this is done, we're done with." But it was something so important for us when we were growing that we were given a box of color pencils and we would scribble all the time. And you see that Amitav's language developed out of those scribbles and doodles that he has. If you go to the early works, they are actually made of just simple linear squiggles and mark making. So we thought how to make this mark making meaningful, or the idea of a painterly gesture be conveyed to whoever wants to address this and learn or participate. So the participation is not just do any graffiti, but do something which you yourself will be surprised by, that you use this material and you created something. And that can actually trigger in them a desire to continue it even when the exhibition is over.
Why do you think people should not miss this exhibition?
As I talked to you about the two wall texts which have materials that these artists have used, I think the idea is also to prompt them to go and search where these materials have been used. For instance, if I write, there is a broken bottle plastic, or there is a broken button, or there is a specific ticket of a specific place that he went to, or there is a use of a string of a particular kind. I think the seeing part, where you must also not see the work just one time, because one time it tells you exactly it's a total picture you grasp. That is how we see. Okay, but in this the story is in the details. So when you go searching, you will find in Amita, oh, he has used human hair. Oh, he has used this there. So we put the list out. They learn to seek, and I think that adds to your visual memory and your visual retention. You will always remember that you saw that. So the exercises that we have chosen are very practical in a way that I think the possibility of learning to see is where the museum comes in. It opens your eyes. It opens the horizon of seeing. Okay, so that you're not seeing it only that yes, there is an object here and I need to see it. You also start understanding. So the animation that you see of Amitava, the line coming and being animated, is just to convey that this is how artists can open any paper, and this is how their hand moves on the paper and draws a human figure or a circle or a relationship between the figure and the world or something else, okay, or the cosmos or the star or the moon. So it is driving them to understand that these are very simple acts and these are normal, natural acts. I always learned in child psychology that the child, when it's born and it's 18 months, nobody teaches him or her. They will express the urge to scribble. And once they express the urge to scribble, they won't stop. They will scribble on the walls of the house, they will scribble on the bed sheet. You just can't stop them. It's a very natural urge to express, to draw. Okay? Now, in an age which is so digitized, in an age where we are so glued to the screen, in an age where everything is becoming so remote, this is a way to bring into your life something extremely intimate and something very natural, which is to draw, to write, to think, to put things together, to assemble and make meanings. I think these are very important gestures and very important ways of dealing with life or addressing life.